On Sunday the 8th of March, 2020, under the light of a full moon, 20 plus people gathered for what had been advertised as a bewitching group walk around the lunar-charged waterways of Sturchley and Lifford. This was the inaugural event of the Walkspace Collective, founded by myself and 2 others in order to promote and proliferate the practice of non-normal walking in the West Midlands. Night vision kicked in as we navigated the woodland paths, lakeside vistas and snaking canals, all under the watchful gaze of the Crow moon, celestial beacon heralding the end of winter. At the canal junction, we used the moon water to cast a spell, dousing the towpath to mark the boundaries, and walking in silence to seal the magic, each participant setting a private intention to be fulfilled by the coming of the next full moon. And so Walkspace was born, and we retired to the pub, buoyed by the impressive turnout and the evident hunger for this sort of thing. We had tapped into the power of collective walking, and for a brief moment we could look forward to the year ahead and the adventures it had in store. A pilgrimage to Milton Keynes for the summer solstice, an anniversary walk for the Kinder Scout mass trespass, and, just maybe, a day trip to Coventry. But then...
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. Because the critical thing we must...
Just like that, we had entered a much smaller, deadlier world, and those dreams of going to Coventry and Milton Keynes now seemed impossibly frivolous.
To leave their home for the following very limited purposes. Shopping for basic necessities as infrequently as possible.
Walking became a purely solitary activity, limited to 1 hour a day. After the initial shock and trauma had subsided, I actually found I took quite well to this gentler pace of life. With the sudden lifting of all responsibilities and demands, I was master of my own time in a way I'd never known before, and probably never would again. I could happily just sit in the garden or stare out the window and not feel guilty or bored. I was sleeping better than I had done in months, and started keeping a dream journal. On a walk, I overheard someone talking on the phone about how they felt a dramatic increase in well-being since they stopped commuting, how they were getting back in touch with old friends, and finally had the time to read. My daily state-sanctioned strolls became my lifeline. If anything, being limited to 1 hour just made me appreciate that time even more. I became more attentive and alert, determined to make every second count. I may have been restricted to my own neighbourhood, but you don't have to go far to find wonders. As Phil Smith wrote, every street you walk down is a treasure of geology and materials. Each window is a museum of symbols. Every tree is a drama of buds, inkissings, wounds and blossoming. For once, many of us have the time to teach ourselves about these things. I started learning to identify the trees and birds. I'd try walking at unusual times of day. I started to notice things I never would have stopped to appreciate before. Like the rogue poplar tree bursting through the pavement. The baffling vintage instructions on the side of a postbox. And the Top Cat figurine perched on a satellite dish. The need to social distance caused physical changes in the landscape. Footpaths became wider, new walking routes appeared, and for once people were encouraged to stray from the beaten tracks and chart new courses across parks and through neighbourhoods. The disappearance of traffic meant that the roads were now walkable too. While the world as a whole had shrunken dramatically, my own small portion of it was expanding to reveal a richness I never could have anticipated. Considering that this was supposed to be the apocalypse, I actually found I was having a pretty good time, as if this was some sort of global experiment to see how we might take to a less ruinous way of life. I sometimes wondered if I should feel guilty for this, when I knew people who were still at work, exhausted, in danger, on the front line or in other key sectors, or else were shielding due to medical conditions and didn't even know when they'd next be able to leave the house. But then I'd see a squirrel and forget all about it. On the night of each full moon, I'd go out to walk, alone. I'd find a body of water, and in the presence of bats, geese, and foxes, I'd attempt to renew the magic for another lunar cycle. The binding energies of the full moon connected me back to that group walk in March, my last real memory of the before time, of a kind of togetherness now unthinkable. It also connected me forward to an imagined re-emergence, for I knew that one day the moon would rise on a post-COVID world in which such gatherings would be possible once more. On the 13th of May, the first easing of lockdown measures came into effect, allowing us to meet outside with just one person from another household. Whereas socialising pre-COVID tended to involve meeting for a coffee or a beer, the only real option now was to meet someone for a walk, which, it turned out, suited me just fine. Having walked alone for so long, I found that walking with another broke me out of my lockdown-forged habits, introducing unexpected detours and bringing fresh perspectives and insights into the well-trodden terrain. On these one-on-one walks, I learnt that dragonflies are actually terrifying, but geese are fine. I learnt that this grey patch under the canal is a filled-in hole from a World War II bomb. I learnt how to extract sap from a silver birch tree for a refreshing beverage. I learnt that there are parakeets in the local woods, and that you always hear them before you see them. I was also introduced to the theory that parakeets are the outlaws of the bird kingdom, and that all pet birds secretly yearn to break free and join them, like a misunderstood child might wish to run away and join the circus. I learnt to identify edible mushrooms that taste just like chicken. I learnt about this terrifying science fiction plant that colonises riverbanks and can hospitalise you with third-degree burns. And I learnt about Mugwort, an unassuming plant which, if harvested on the full moon, can be burnt in a ritual setting for purposes of divination. By ever so gradually coming out of isolation, I felt like I was rediscovering what it is that makes walking with others so special in the first place. After just a few simple one-on-one walks, my South Birmingham suburb had become re-enchanted with whole new unexpected layers of ecological intrigue. Towards the end of one walk, we stopped beside the culvert that takes the River Ray beneath the railway, and my walking partner for that day suggested walking through to see where we end up. I thought, great, let's come back with wellies sometime. But before I knew it, they had hopped across the stepping stones and were approaching the mouth of the tunnel, gesturing as if to say, "What? Not afraid of getting your feet wet, are you?" A new threshold had been crossed, and further adventures beckoned.
In a dream, if you grow feathers and they were beautiful and the wind was rippling them. Absolutely glorious.
With June came further easing of lockdown restrictions, allowing outdoor gatherings of up to 6 people. For the first time, the Walkspace team was able to meet up unmediated, and we celebrated with a summer solstice walk, visiting local landmarks we had discovered in lockdown, such as the ginkgo biloba tree, the entrance to hell, the rogue poplar, the bindweed curtain, the funhouse mirror door, and the experimental caged garden. We finished in the allotments overlooking the Ray Valley, and as the sun went down, we raised a toast to midsummer. It wasn't Milton Keynes, but it was the most human interaction any of us had had in months, and in its own humble way, it was cosmic.
I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest, and true as any on the shadowed wilds.
An unforeseen result of my one-on-one walks was that I now had a small group of people who were up for exploring at a deeper level than the casual stroll. Taking advantage of the lifted restrictions, we arranged an expedition to Cannon Hill Park to see if we could access the sunken riverside path beside the Mac. Once again, I was happy to have my cautious inclinations vetoed by the eagerness of others.
And then the other one they're talking about introducing.
On reaching the end of the path, we climbed back to street level and ventured into Balsall Heath to see if we could access the culvert further along. We came to a tight bend in the road and determined that the river must be on the other side of the fence. We lingered for a while to see if we could make anything out, and just as we were about to move on, Rue noticed some fading graffiti written in French, and was able to translate it as "the poetry is in the street." Clearly it was a sign, and as we stood trying to discern the origin of this phrase, we were hailed by a couple of construction workers renovating the adjacent property. My first instinct was that they must think we looked suspicious and want us to move on, but as I began to shuffle uncomfortably, one of them said, "You know, you could get a much better view from up here."
Are you going to do it?
How is it? How?
Even if we break our legs.
No, I just. Thank you so much.
just when we thought it was over, our new friends said, "If it's the river you're interested in, you know we've got a ladder, right?"
Of course I'm scared. Tell everybody that.
That's so eerie.
Someone shout into it.
In the side of the man-made gorge was a man-made cave, and on the ceiling we found a huddle of old lady moths, with estimates of the number ranging from 26 to 150. On returning back to street level, the custodians of the river bade us farewell with a shower of rose petals, saying, "Go forth, for this is your lucky day." Kate turned and said, "You are our luck," to which they replied, "No, you are ours." We walked for a moment in silence as we reoriented ourselves. Rue summed up that strange sense of dislocation upon returning to the world by saying that it now felt like the river had been the true level of the city and that the streets were raised above on platforms.